crimes in this country, and that drug offences amongst that list of crimes were up by approaching 1/5. Significant increase. And in fact, another alarming statistic was that more than 1/4 of 10 to 25-year-olds were a victim of crime in that year, whether it be assault or personal theft. So you'll see that actually in terms of assault, more than 15% of 10 to 25-year-olds were subject to an assault in 2007-08 in terms of criminal activity. And we see this, don't we? We see gun crime, knife crime, and the gang warfare that we see on the streets, particularly in the streets of major metropolitan areas like London, Manchester, Birmingham and so on. We see these things reported. They're distasteful, but they are signs of the world getting a lot worse very quickly, rapid degeneration, all of which is an indicator of Jesus' return. Let's consider the next area, record prison levels. Again, here's some statistics. It's a fact of history and a fact of recording that we are now at our highest ever prison population, approaching 80,000 people in this country in prison. Now, to put that in some kind of context, that's one person in prison for about every 800 people in the country, which is quite an alarming statistic, isn't it? And indeed, between 1993, again this is from the National Statistics part of the government's recording, between 1993 and 2003 the prison population increased by 64%. And you can see this, can't you, on these numbers of thousands of people in prison, and the way in which it's lifted dramatically over the last decade or so, having sort of flatlined, and now this huge increase, almost a doubling of the prison population. And in fact, there was a report only about a week ago, just over a week, about a week and a half ago, by the Ministry of Justice, where they forward predicted what the growth in the prison population is likely to be based on their statistical sort of analysis. And they suggested that on a high scenario, in the next 5 or 6 years, the prison population is going to start getting very close to 100,000 people, which would be something like 1 in 600 people in prison in this country. So again, it's indicators of a real moral degeneration, the incidence of crime, the punishment of crime, and all of the things that are associated with criminal activity. So what else? What else can we see in the world? The family unit breaking down is one of the other things. We remember we read what the Bible said: disobedience to parents, unthankful, unholy, ungodly, mockers. And certainly when we look at the way the world is, we see ample evidence, sorry and sad evidence, of the breakdown of the family unit. Again, looking at some national statistics, this was an article that was produced fairly recently, and it described that cohabiting is the fastest growing of all family types. This is a graph of all the different types of families, lone mother, lone father, and a married couple family. And you see that actually the married couple family and the distribution of that compared to the cohabiting couple family, certainly amongst between, say, 20 and 35, the vast majority of families are cohabiting couples as opposed to married couples. I mean, you can see the shape of the graph really tells you that this is something that is the young generation of today which is following these things, despite the fact that the Bible very clearly describes what is the right way, what is God's way, which is so different to man's choices. That's just one example. Again, the Bible teaches that marriage is a vow and a commitment, and yet, what is it that we see in the world? Well, of all the marriages in 2008, it's calculated that 45% of those will end in divorce. Almost a half of marriages in 2008 will end in divorce, which is up from about a third in 1980. So it's getting worse. In 2006, these are all the different sources, the Daily Mail, the Independent. In 2006 it was calculated that almost a quarter of children live with just one parent. Almost 25%, which was 3 times the amount 30 or so years ago, just over 30 years before that, in 1972. Okay, moral decline, the world getting worse. We're seeing evidence. In fact, all of those really come together in what was an article in the Telegraph newspaper earlier this year, only sort of 4 or 5 months ago, which just described in simple terms the death of the traditional family. It described the death of the what's perhaps sometimes referred to as the nuclear family, and that is no longer the case. People do not follow those traditional practices, if you like, for want of a better word, and things have changed, dramatically changed, and changed for the worse, is the simple and sorry message. So I said this wouldn't make pleasant viewing, but really, again, let's remind ourselves that these are indicators that Jesus is coming to put things right, to change things for the better in the world. Just remember that positive message. And then the final thing we said we'd look at is the no sense of right and wrong. Well, we'll just bring up a few pictures. A familiar picture on something like Crime Stoppers, isn't it? A break-in in a car, a theft in a car, or breaking in a house. This is a gun haul from the streets of London. Just over a short period of time, all of these firearms were confiscated. And we've seen posters like this talking about amnesties on knives to be handed in because clearly they're costing many young people's lives. This was an event of only a month or so ago, a month or two ago, which was a terrible brawl at a football match, Millwall versus West Ham. The basest elements of humanity. You see the police in number there. And then this was just an advertisement. It's actually not from this country. It's actually from America, talking about the damage that drugs do in American society. You probably won't be able to read it, but it reads, arrested over 1 million people in the United States. Arrested 1 million people, wasted 10 billion tax dollars, provided $90 billion to violent criminal gangs, and that all happened in 1 year in America. That was statistics. 1 million arrests, 10 billion tax dollars wasted, $90 billion put in the hands of criminal gangs and criminal elements in 1 year, in one country. This is the way the world is. The world gets worse. And again, the Bible absolutely and accurately describes these things, as horrific as they are. In fact, this is what the Bible says. Again, this is a different passage. It's in Romans. It speaks about the kind of blatant godlessness of society as it will be and as it is. We'll just read you the words. Who, knowing the judgment of God, not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them. So it's not only about wrong activities, wrong things being performed, but actually others taking pleasure in that. And again, is that the kind of thing that we see in the news media? Others taking pleasure in the criminal activities they see